we'll just, without further ado, just move to our next panel with Katti Gray as our moderator. Speakers are on your list in the agenda, and their bios are there, and we'll give you a brief snippet of who they are as Katti introduces them. Katti, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Senators Bartolotta and Williams, Ms. Placey, Ms. Trusty, thank you for being here this morning. We will, the journals have your bios. We will take you in alphabetical order. Senator Bartolotta first, Ms. Placey, Ms. Trusty, and then Senator Williams. Senator Bartolotta.
Trying to hit that mute button for you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so very, very much for inviting me to speak a little bit today. I truly appreciate it. It is a very important topic that all of us are passionate about on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the Capitol, and all across Pennsylvania. Criminal justice reform efforts in Pennsylvania have truly been a team effort. And my fellow panelists and colleague, Senator Williams, has been an incredible partner in addressing the issues that are holding our Commonwealth back from reaching our greatest potential. That includes legislation that we introduced together to enact comprehensive probation reform. Fixing our probation system is one of the most important reforms the General Assembly has considered this year. We have a system in place today that sends probationers to jail for committing traffic violations or for taking a trip to the shore. These are things that would never result in any sort of criminal conviction otherwise. The criminal justice system was designed to both protect the public and to pave the way for individuals to be rehabilitated and successfully reintegrated into the community, not to stick people in a revolving door that inevitably leads back to incarceration. I'm thankful that the Senate unanimously passed our bill in July to limit the impact of technical violations and reduce the amount of time and resources devoted to probationers who are working to reintegrate back into society. Our probation reform bill is just one piece of a larger puzzle for the bipartisan, bicameral criminal justice reform caucus that I founded with my fellow co-chairs late last year. As a board member of the Pennsylvania Prison Society, I'm focused on ways to help promote safer communities, reduce prison costs, and ultimately ensure better outcomes for individuals who are part of the criminal justice system. One of our landmark achievements last year was passing the second phase of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, or JRI-2. Those bills, which were signed into law in December, will streamline the placement of offenders in drug treatment programs and other intermediate punishment programs, while also improving the parole process for nonviolent offenders. These changes are estimated to save taxpayers $45 million over the first 5 years. A portion of those savings will be used to strengthen county probation and parole services. These reforms come on the heels of the first phase of JRI reforms that reintroduced the inmate population in state prisons. That reduced the inmate population in state prisons by more than 4,300, cut the crime rate by approximately 29%, and saved $400 million in costs to taxpayers. One of the other things I'm very passionate about is changing the way the Board of Pardons conducts commutations. This is a vital step. The Pardons Board can give someone the ultimate form of forgiveness for the state of Pennsylvania. And since 1995, we have seen that process come to a screeching halt. We can do better. We have individuals who are incarcerated for life, many juvenile lifers. And thankfully, there was a federal bill that was passed. It was at Williams versus Alabama. And actually, one of those individuals who benefited from that bill has become a good friend of mine, was incarcerated with my fiance for 23 months. And there are 4 other lifers that I have been committed to remaining in contact with to not just learn what their life is like on the inside, but to be a voice for those that are incarcerated at every different level for what's going on inside. I just spent 5 hours on last Sunday at SCI Chester in the Scandinavia unit. I'm passionate about really reforming the whole criminal justice system because Pennsylvania has gotten it wrong for far too long. We need a Department of Corrections and reform, not just warehousing. We need to do much better to keep people from falling into the criminal justice system in the first place. And a lot of that has to do with education and with training and keeping families together and focusing our funding on communities before individuals get locked into this revolving door of the criminal justice system. So I'm so happy that a lot of focus has been paid on this, to this situation, to this issue. Right off the bat, all the chairs of the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus were inundated with phone calls from groups that were very on opposite ends of a lot of other issues. The Koch brothers and the ACLU and Van Jones and Newt Gingrich. I mean, you can't get further apart in a political spectrum for the most part, but I think everybody is very focused on what needs to be done with reforming criminal justice and taking a good look at how we can do things much, much better, make our communities safer, keep families together, and build Pennsylvania with a strong workforce and strong families and strong communities. So thank you for letting me be part of today's discussion.
Thank you so much. Ms. Placey?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, I want to thank the John Jay College of Criminal Justice for inviting me to share the perspective of county adult probation in Pennsylvania. I have 3 areas that I want to cover: the current status of Pennsylvania's probation system, second, our efforts to implement evidence-based practices statewide, and third is the need to utilize more pretrial diversion, especially for individuals with mental illness or drug and alcohol addiction. So let me start with some general information about county probation in Pennsylvania. We have 65 county adult probation departments. These departments supervise about 250,000 offenders in the community. In comparison, the state parole board supervises about 41,000 people. So that's about 86% versus 14%. There are numerous roadblocks the county probation departments face, but I'm going to mention just 2. First, caseloads are high and continue to grow. Based on the Parole Board's 2018 County Statistical Report, the average active caseload is 105 offenders per county officer. This is more than double the recommendation of the American Probation and Parole Association, who suggests caseloads of 50 offenders to 1 officer. Studies show that reduced caseloads in combination with evidence-based practices can lead to improved recidivism outcomes. A second challenge is the lack of funding. County probation departments carry the largest share of the correctional workload, but the state provides only a fraction of the funding. It's an amount that's not adequate to support effective probation and parole services. The state grant and aid program is supposed to include covering up to 80% of county probation salaries. Grant and aid funding was close to meeting that goal in the late 80s, but since then, grant and aid has steadily declined. A legislative budget and finance committee report shows that over the last 10 years, grant and aid funding for county probation has been less than 20%. It's currently around 16–17%. So what are our options? We either hire more probation officers or we need to reduce the number of people on probation supervision. So what will work? Well, we believe the implementation of evidence-based practices. EBPs are the application of science into practice. These practices have been empirically tested and been shown to reduce recidivism among offenders. There are several key principles of EBP, but one is using an actuarial risk assessment tool to determine the drivers of criminal behavior. Research shows that the top criminogenic risk factors are antisocial attitudes, values, and beliefs. It seems many judges and prosecutors focus on substance abuse, which is one of the lesser criminogenic factors. This misdirection leads to long probation terms, and research shows that does not enhance public safety. By over-supervising low-risk offenders, we have the potential to increase the risk to recidivate, not decrease it. The Council of State Government analysis shows that average length of probation terms exceeds the period when the most recidivism occurs. So this stretches caseloads and program resources. CSG reports the average time to failure occurs within the 17 to 1 month range. Therefore, probation terms exceeding 24 months is not necessary for the majority of offenders and puts a burden on the already overwhelmed county probation caseloads. A similar report from Pew Trust shows that individuals on probation who commit a new crime typically happen within the first 10 to 18 months. So probation terms that last for years often fail to deliver better outcomes compared to shorter periods of supervision. Once EBPs are implemented, our criminal justice system should see things like improved outcomes, reduced recidivism, reduced use of jail and prison for violators, and better use of public resources. We also need to utilize more pretrial diversion from the criminal justice system, especially for individuals with mental illness and drug and alcohol addiction. Research tells us that the earlier treatment intervention or diversion occurs, the more likely the person will engage in and successfully complete drug and alcohol or mental health treatment. Instead of focusing our attention on the back end of the system, more effort should be placed diverting people to the front end with regard to treatment. Diversion programs can eliminate the stigma of a criminal conviction or arrest record. If we focus more on diversion and early intervention, there's more of an incentive for individuals to engage in treatment, which will result in more successful outcomes. So what's the best options for reform? As Senator Bartolotta mentioned, in 2019, we had Senate Bill 14, which was introduced. In its original version, it would have created hard caps on probation terms with 3 years for misdemeanors and 5 years for felonies. A few months later, the House introduced its own version of reform that included similar hard caps. Our members have always supported hard caps on probation sentences. Through several amendments to both bills, the hard caps have been eliminated and placed with something called mandatory probation review conferences, or what they refer to as soft caps. Really will not have any impact. A better solution is to incentivize good behavior with a reduction in the probation term. Requiring another hearing in front of a judge isn't necessary to an already overburdened court system. We recommend a presumptive early termination when the person completes half of their original probation term or at 24 months, which is ever earlier. As long as the person successfully completes all their conditions with no violations, a petition is automatically generated and signed by the judge. Waiting for reviews at 3 years or 5 years is too long to have any meaningful impact. The practice of early termination in probation is already permitted by statute. It's a common practice in some counties. The reduced term allows for sufficient time for probation officers to develop a plan, assist with addressing criminogenic needs, and should in turn result in behavior change. This will reduce the likelihood of future criminal behavior. And finally, I want to provide a suggestion to the journalists. Please try to promote the positive work that county probation officers do on a daily basis. There are a great many stories out there. The goal of county probation is to ensure public safety, but also to provide the support necessary to change offender behavior. Pennsylvania needs to be smart about reducing probation caseloads. We can improve the current system by exchanging longer supervision for better supervision. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide remarks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Placey. Ms. Trusty?
Thank you so much, Ms. Gray. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here today with my fellow panelists and with this audience. As Katti said, my name is Celeste Trusty, and I'm Pennsylvania State Policy Director for FAMM. FAMM has advocated individualized proportional sentencing laws since 1991, and we're proud to work here in Pennsylvania alongside so many incredible organizations and advocates, policymakers, and incarcerated allies to create a system of justice that works better for everyone. Pennsylvania's draconian approach to sentencing is not only extremely wasteful and fiscally irresponsible, but it separates our families, it devastates our communities, and it exacerbates already severe racial disparities. It also deprives people who have made mistakes of nearly any opportunity for redemption, for mercy, or for a second chance. So in an effort to advance policies and procedures to address these wrongs, FAMM recently launched our Second Chances agenda to work toward creating and expanding mechanisms for relief for people who are trapped in this cycle of perpetual punishment. Here in Pennsylvania, our Second Chances agenda includes ending life without parole, passing medical and elderly release legislation, and expanding the application of compassionate release, as well as broadly expanding the use of clemency. All of us change and mature. None of us should be defined by our worst moments, and our laws and our concept of justice should reflect those facts, but they don't, and that's why we're here today. One of the most glaring problems in Pennsylvania's legal system is that we have mandatory life without parole as a sentence for first and second degree murder. And we also have many people serving these excessively long virtual life sentences. But we deny people serving these sentences any substantial avenues for relief. We spent more than $2.7 billion on state corrections in the Commonwealth in fiscal year 2019. We as taxpayers are paying for this. We're paying to keep human beings warehoused in prison, even in cases of advanced age and medical conditions, or simply when incarceration serves no further public safety purpose. Life without parole sentencing has also contributed to the mass incarceration crisis here in Pennsylvania. Our population serving life without parole is rapidly growing larger and older. To put this in context, in 1980, we had 848 people serving life here in the Commonwealth, and their average age was about 33 and a half. Now, that number has ballooned to more than 5,000 people, and their average age is now over 48 years old. Some of these people were convicted at young ages and have already served decades in prison, maturing, growing, and making substantial positive contributions to their prison communities and their home communities. Our practice of indiscriminately sentencing people to life without parole also causes disproportionate harm to Pennsylvania's individuals, families, and communities of color that can be felt throughout generations. Black Pennsylvanians are serving life without parole at a rate 18 times higher than white Pennsylvanians. Among Latinx Pennsylvanians, that rate is 5 times higher than white Pennsylvanians. We need to consider the impact of denying opportunities for second chances on Pennsylvania's communities and families, especially on those who are already most marginalized. Since 1996, our aging prison population in the Commonwealth grew from 6% to 22% of the overall prison population. And we now have more than 10,000 people over the age of 50 living in our state prisons. The cost of incarcerating older people with chronic illnesses is around 2 to 3 times higher than incarcerating younger folks. But recidivism rates continue to decline as we age. Maintaining such an enormous population of older and sick people in our prisons is expensive, it's unjust, and it's unnecessary. Passing legislation to allow this population of people to seek relief through medical and elderly release mechanisms should be a priority for our state lawmakers, especially in the face of COVID and the budget shortfalls facing our Commonwealth. Currently, clemency through sentence commutation is really the only pathway to second chances for people serving these long and life without parole and even death sentences in Pennsylvania. People seeking clemency must get support from the 5-person Board of Pardons before advancing to the governor for their final approval or denial. Before 1997, a simple 3-2 majority support from the Board of Pardons was required for a person seeking commutation of a life or a death sentence to advance to the governor for approval. But now, these applicants must be supported by a stringent, unanimous Board of Pardons vote. As Senator Bartolotta said, she has a bill in the Senate to change that. And in the House, there's also a bill from Representative McClinton to change that vote back to 3-2. Under the leadership of Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, the board has taken some very positive steps toward expanding the critical process of clemency. And as advocates, we encourage the board to build on this momentum and create a much more robust clemency system. The General Assembly can also act, and they should also act, to support expanded clemency through advancing the legislation that we previously mentioned. In my opinion, Pennsylvania's legal system does not look like justice, and I think that all of our panelists here can agree. As residents of Pennsylvania, we must ask ourselves if this is how we want our system of justice to operate, and if this is how we want our tax dollars to be allocated. The more educated we are as individuals about these issues, as voters about these issues, and the more quality journalism that is produced about these issues, the better we can all work toward building a legal system that prioritizes fairness and balances punishment and accountability with mercy. So if you'd like to hear more about what FAMM Second Chances Agenda looks like, please text chances to 21333, or you can visit us at famm.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trusty. Senator Williams? Senator Williams, you ready? Cannot hear you. Okay, I think we can hear you. Okay, you are on mute. You are still listed as mute on my end. Chris?
Yeah, I muted him, unmuted him. Still don't hear him though. Senator, can you go ahead and say something? No, I think it's his microphone.
Okay, Tony, what if you gave me a call and I put you on speaker? Would that be helpful? Okay, how's that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
A little bit of an echo here. Okay, there we go.
Can you, I think Chris, he needs to turn off his laptop
There
perhaps.
you go.
Okay, go ahead.
It's still like
No, that's not gonna work.
it's too much time now.
What's the dial? Chris,
I'm sorry.
Chris,
Hang
can
on.
you give him the dial-in number?
Yes, I'll get that right now.
Thank you.
It's worth a try.
Thank you, Senator.
Mhm.
All right, yeah, just give me a minute, guys.
Sure. I will also try to look it up quickly.
In the meantime, can I add just a little bit to some of the things that we're doing in the Capitol? As Ms. Trusty was talking about, not just the pardon, the pardons board reshuffling the number a bit, but also I really want to bring forward, I'm sure that Senator Williams will be talking about this very shortly, but are the clean slate legislation that was passed in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was the very first state in the country to have a clean slate law, and that is something that has made a difference to millions of individuals who had some offenses on their record that were there for decades and decades and decades, nonviolent offenses, not felonies, but these were things that were on their record, preventing them from getting a better job, housing, education, all of these other things because they drugged this with them. The clean slate legislation that just passed last year allows nonviolent misdemeanor convictions to have their records sealed. That is after 10 years of being crime-free. The non-conviction records, the sealing would be done as a matter of course, given that the presumption of innocence is one of the bedrocks of the American criminal justice system. So sealing those records after 10 years is a vital step in the right direction. I'm proud to say that House Bill 440 which was a companion bill to my legislation, Senate Bill 883, is now currently before the full Senate for consideration, and that is a delosure bill, and it offers expungement for those offenses that happened 10 years ago, for those with a clean slate for that long. It also would provide immediate sealing for anyone who was pardoned and until the expungement occurs. A lot of people don't realize that once they've been given a pardon, the highest form of forgiveness for Pennsylvania, they still have those charges, those offenses on their record, even though they've been pardoned. So without an expungement, which is costly, and you have to pay a price for every single count, a lot of our folks that have come out of incarceration after decades, how are they going to afford to get their records expunged? So there should be an automatic expungement for that. Lastly, before I turn it over to Senator Williams, I don't know if he's got the phone call going.
Senator Williams, if you can hear me, I sent you the dial-in number in the chat. If you go to the chat at the bottom of your screen, sir.
Okay. And lastly, about the expungement, some folks that might be listening in, if you are arrested but not convicted, you still have a record of that arrest. It should be, if you are not convicted of the crime, your record should be expunged automatically. And that was what my legislation would be doing. And I'm very happy to see that the companion legislation is moving to the Senate for a vote. So for those journalists out there, and full disclosure, my daughter is a news anchor for CBS in New Orleans, but she along with all of our journalists are very passionate about getting it right and not putting something out there that could be incredibly harmful for someone for the rest of their life. We have to get it right, because a headline today, to redact it, is usually on the 8th page, bottom corner. So we have to be sure that what gets out there accurately portrays someone in the right light. So expunging any arrest record that does not result in conviction. Looks like we might be able to hear my colleague soon.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Apologize. They came in and redid my office with new internet stuff, and of course, as always, they screwed it up. But that's here today. Look, I want to sort of focus not so much on the incidents, because I think all of us are quite clear about how much farther we have to go in Pennsylvania, and we can certainly debate the details of how far and what works, caps versus soft caps, et cetera. What I think is most significant for my comments are two things. One, Pennsylvania is uniquely positioned at the dark ages as it relates to this. We have a Republican and a Democratic body, so Republican majorities in both the House and Senate, and a Democratic governor. And first time in Pennsylvania's history, we've decided to take on reforming our systems of the judiciary. And frankly, it's scary to many people who are established and sort of entrenched in the old methods. But I want to bring a few things to our collective attention. One, and there was a question asked about this: how do we get more Republicans engaged? Frankly, the momentum came from the Republicans, not the ones who are currently here. It was my bill that I introduced originally, Senate Bill 14, in its original version. I also worked on some of the other legislation we talked about. But what happened was Justice Action Network, Commonwealth Foundation, the American Conservative Union, which is working nationally. These are groups that are working nationally, working with Republicans in those states to get them to understand, one, there's a fiscal consequence as well as a human capital consequence. So to what's really central, if we expect to go farther and get beyond the limitations of either race, class, or party affiliation, the relationships built out of need is what will drive us to further understand how much farther we have to go. I certainly am empathetic to many of my constituents, certainly to me and my family, who are black and brown and find themselves in a modest condition. But the reality is overwhelming majority of the General Assembly are folks who are not black and brown. And so they don't necessarily know the stories. And I'm not even casting aspersions upon their motivations. The fact is we're sent to represent our individuals. Without, frankly, some of these other groups working that are nationally known for working in this space, we wouldn't have made the progress we made. Certainly, I do agree that we have to go farther. Hard caps will be much better than soft caps. The fact is that we have a bill that's moving, and we have the ability to have a conversation with many members who never have talked about these issues, don't even understand the consequence and the destruction which is occurring under the current system. And once they engage in the conversation, they have to be educated about what does this mean? Does this mean we're now soft on crime? Does it mean we're going to let people out into our communities that are going to make our communities less safe? And the fact is, the data shows us that it makes our communities much more safer because these folks are appreciative and prepared to participate within our communities. But again, that would not happen without a bipartisan and frankly different ideologies having a common interest in changing the system. So the details we'll talk about further, you know, how far it should go, what it should look like, those are all important. But frankly, this is simply, you know, about how we move the political agenda forward in this nation beyond the limitations of what we see and at us yelling at each other. This is a very unique space where Democrats and Republicans and moderates, conservatives, and progressives are all meeting around one interest, and that is how do we make this much more fair, much more transparent, and less costly to the taxpayers.
Thank you so much, Senator. I have a couple of questions, and then I'm going to ask the questions on behalf of the journalist here. And the first one actually is for Ms. Placey, given sort of the place of parole and probation in recidivism and changing that. What was, and your organization opposed this bill that Senator Bartolotta cited. What were the specific objections to the July passage of this bill that was aimed at refining the system of parole and probation? Were y'all a part of the discussion beforehand? And to what extent are you a part of the subsequent discussion about that bill?
Well, let me say, we did not publicly oppose it. We did not find out about the passage in the Senate until the afternoon before, so we were not part of the discussion of the amendments. But as I said, we had real concerns because, as Senator Williams stated, we believe hard caps are the solution because that's what the research shows. When you go beyond 24 months, you have diminishing returns on supervision. So I understand the compromise with these softer caps. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was an opposition, but it's a concern. It's not real reform in our eyes. If we want to do something, we need to have teeth in it because this is not going to reduce caseloads. This is not going to improve offender outcomes because we're going to have people, as it was stated earlier, just keep going through the revolving door until we can get these caseloads reduced. And one of the other things, and I don't want to get into the too much of this because this could be a whole day panel, is talking about technical violations. That is an area that is very misunderstood and very much overblown. You know, we hear anecdotal stories and somebody will say, well, this person was locked up because they were 5 minutes late for an appointment. That's actually not the case. And, you know, I had a lot more notes that I wanted to add to my comments, but if you ask somebody further, you know, how many violations did this person have? It might be 10 or 20. So typically incarceration on a technical violation is a last resort. So one of the areas that we actually did oppose is the limits for incarceration on technical violations, because we don't believe there should be a cookie cutter approach, because there are some technical violations that are quite serious. And the whole circumstance of the totality of the violations should be considered by the judge, and incarceration might be warranted, because we're not also factoring in the front end of the system. Maybe somebody was charged with very serious crimes, and through a negotiation from the prosecutor, it was a reduced charge and the person was given probation. So those were just some of our, I will call them concerns about the legislation. So we're hopeful that it might have some more teeth if it continues to move forward.
Thank you. And this question is for both the senators. Senator Bartolotta, I did notice your post George Floyd statement about the need for public safety for honoring police officers who do their job well and ensuring that police officers who don't are taken out of the system. And to both of the senators, I am wondering what is the discussion, the momentum dealing with the issue of qualified immunity and how Pennsylvania addresses that. Police officers who, in various circumstances, are not having their cases adjudicated.
Senator Williams, I can't see.
All right. Yeah. So,
Okay.
but
I'll
let me
go.
back. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me go backwards first. I appreciate some of the comments that Ms. Placey made, but be very clear that Pennsylvania, as she knows, is a very broad state, and compromise is a part of the legislative process. We have to start someplace. And frankly, giving a non-cookie cutter approach is part of the problem. Judges have arbitrary decisions, and I have to, with all due respect, some of the cases I'm quite familiar with regard to technical violations need definition what technical violation is, because judges in X county are not operating the same manner that judges in Philadelphia are operating. And that has led to a disparity and an abuse on occasion of what probation was supposed to look like. That's the nature of the bill. And so, yes, I agree about the soft caps, and I agree sooner is better than later, but I don't agree with some of the other comments around technical violations in the manner in which it's used. It's been abused, and the facts point to that. With regard to the other question that was asked, there are members of the General Assembly who are looking at legislation to deal with the protections that artificially protect officers who clearly shouldn't be police officers and are abusing that privilege and bringing a bad name to good police officers. And we are certainly looking into the contracts which are struck, how they are fashioned, and the fact that the current law protects them from that. So there is discussion in that space with Democrats and Republicans with regard to that.
Senator Bartolotta, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. We have been, again, to Senator Williams' point, there's a good bit of legislation out there that is taking a direct look at training for police officers, consequences, all sorts of things that have been put on the very front of people's minds in the last 7-8 months. I spent an entire day at the Pennsylvania State Police Training Facility recently. There were a large group of senators that were there, and we were there all day, and we talked about their de-escalation training. We talked about their racial bias training. We talked about all kinds of issues. And these new classes of cadets spend a lot of time learning, training, doing scenarios, discussing and revealing what may be inherent in some people, but realizing that there is an issue and we have to address it, and we have to face it, and we have to do a lot of training and scenarios, and realize that there are many things that we can do differently and much better. So I was encouraged to see that there was a lot of attention paid to these new training programs for our Pennsylvania state troopers, and very encouraged by what the curriculum is and how much time they focus on those things that will help bring communities together and hopefully and prayerfully prevent anything like the George Floyd murder from happening again. So it was good for us to see that they're focusing a lot on that kind of training.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Great.
We have a number of questions. So I'm going to go ahead, Senator. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I apologize for nothing. Q&A. Are you asking us those questions?
Yes, those were mine, and I'm gonna jump into the fellows' questions right now. Okay?
There were some great questions on there. I wanted to answer, but I can't type that fast, so I'm glad you're going to ask them.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so this one is from Lori Mason Schroeder from the Morning Call. It's a question on probation. Which counties are utilizing early termination? Do you have any specific examples that we can research for stories?
There are numerous counties. Off the top of my head, I would highly recommend York County, and I can get you the contact information. I can type it in, Katti, if you prefer. York County, Lancaster County does automatic early termination, and they have fairly good success rates.
Okay, and this question is from Joshua Vaughn of The Appeal. Every year, hundreds of children are charged as adults in Pennsylvania because of the state's direct file law. Is there any movement or desire within the legislature to rescind the automatic direct file laws passed in the mid-1990s to keep children out of the adult criminal justice system?
So there is a desire. There's no movement. And this intersection with regard to, the reform creates some opportunity around a lot of different areas, this being one. But there's so much work to be done. I'm glad it was raised because I'm not sure that it is caught in the same level of momentum that some other issues are. It's an egregious consequence to how the pendulum swung at a certain period of time. And the stories are crushing when you talk to someone who's been there in prison for 30, 40 years, and even after 10 years, 5 years. And so, yes, there is interest in changing it, but I would not suggest right now, without continually writing about it and lifting it up, that there'll be the same level of momentum as we're talking about probation.
This next question is from Kareth Gabriel from the Philadelphia Weekly. And it is, would you agree that there needs to either be additional psychological pre-testing of police cadets or more detailed training asking specific questions to gauge a cadet's level of racial bias before hitting the street, or is the need for the officers just to, question sort of ends there. And the obvious second question is this being discussed in the legislature? And to what extent does the legislature have that kind of control over local police departments?
Well, I'll chime in because, sorry, Tony. I think that sort of plays into what I spoke about before with at least the state troopers are dealing with more in-depth evaluations of cadets. And as far as local goes, that is so many of, even just in my one district, the police departments that I have are run so differently. It would be hard to know exactly what it is they're going through when they get to that particular location, but I'm just hoping that the training just for those local police includes a very detailed evaluation. I do know for sure that at least at the state police level, they are looking at psychological profiles and things like that to determine if there is something that is sort of brewing that would lead to issues of racial bias and even overaggression. And that was at least at the state trooper level. But as far as local police go, I'm not aware of exactly what they do at that level. Maybe you can add to it, Tony.
So this is an area that needs a complete overhaul, certainly around issues of race, but gender, understanding of other people's background, their culture, faith, there needs to be a baseline with regard to policing in Pennsylvania. There needs to be specific training and criteria as it relates to that understanding. And yes, the obvious, people should be looking at your Facebook pages to see, you know, who you're interacting with and what you're interacting with. That should be a minimum standard that's not a requirement currently. And it's always, I hate to say it this way, but it's always confusing to me when people are shocked to discover that somebody is intolerant and that they say it publicly. And they've been saying it for like 4 years on Facebook before they were hired. We didn't look in their background. But that being said, you know, when you come in, there should be a baseline. But frankly, people don't understand. Police officers and state troopers are in a pretty stressful job. They need mental health support, period, even beyond this issue of intolerance and ignorance. Good, qualified men and women are out there are under a lot of stress, making life and death decisions in split seconds. And even if they make the right one and they unfortunately have to shoot someone and kill them, that affects a human being, especially if they're conscious. They're not given that level of support to get them through their careers. And so there's two parts to this. One, obviously, we should be looking, vetting, and training people who are prepared to deal with all types of people. But the other part is once they are, you know, given that opportunity to be a peace officer, we need to give them the support so they can continue that effort. That it would change the culture of policing wherever it is. So that means if you see something within the department, you're not an outlier by telling people something inappropriate that occurred. And I'm not just talking about issues of race. I'm talking about people who do corrupt things as well. So there is a lot of work to be done with regard to training, the type of training and the supports that we give police officers in Pennsylvania.
We have about 3 more minutes left. I'm going to do one more question and then have each of the panelists sort of do a whip around. We're interested in finding out what stories you think journalists need to do or get right, or et cetera. So this last question is from Joseph Jafari from Spotlight, Pennsylvania, and it's for the senators. Republican support for criminal justice, for Senator Bartolotta. Republican support for criminal justice reform is fairly new, especially under current leadership, which is still very, quote, law and order, close quote. What needs to happen for more strict, conservative, tough on crime lawmakers to come into the fold of criminal justice reform?
Those that are of the like mind that Senator Williams and I are, we need to be a lot more vocal. We need to have more hearings. We need to have more discussions, more conversations with people who still, and I haven't really run into that many, even Republicans on my side of the aisle, that are lock them up, throw away the key, and oh, tough on crime. I have conversations with my side of the aisle all the time about these issues. And so many of them refer back to, oh, back in the day, back in the 90s, we're paying the price for that kind of thinking. Again, yeah, you're going to run into a few people who just, they're adamant about, you know, well, hey, you know, 3 strikes, you're out, lock them up, and you do the crime, you do the time. But when you really think about the psychology of what has brought some of these individuals into a situation where they find themselves to be incarcerated or, you know, involved in the criminal justice system, you want to ask some of these, and I have asked a lot of my colleagues, you know, back when you were a teenager, you did some pretty stupid things, you know, maybe your local cop said, hey, you know, get home, I'm going to call your mom or your dad or whatever, you know, knock it off. But today, things are a lot different. We live in such a litigious culture that one error in judgment, one stupid thing that somebody does leaves a mark on them for a lifetime. Even minimal offenses, you know, just misdemeanors that are carried with them, you know, that interfere with their ability to get a job, a home, all of these other things that 20 years ago would have just been, okay, knock it off. You know, and I'm not talking about any kind of assaults or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. But we're putting people behind bars for anything we can think of, and stacking offenses. You know, that's another horrific problem that we have. And taking individuals who don't have the means and the wherewithal to pay for good defense. they will cop a plea because they've been told they're going to spend X number of years if they don't admit to a crime that they may not have ever done.
Senator
So
Bartolotta, can I jump in?
Please do.
Thank you so much. We're about out of time, but would each of you take 15 seconds to tell us the story you think needs to be covered in this universe right now? Senator
Anthony?
Why don't we let the other folks who haven't been able to talk, like Ms. Placey and Celeste first, and then we can close out with ours.
Ms. Placey?
Sure. Oh.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Trusty, go on.
All right, sounds good. So honestly, I mean, the media has contributed to the public discourse around crime and public safety and even second chances, and you can really help shape the conversation and shift it forward to allow second chances. And I mean, honestly, think of some of the most amazing and impactful recent Pennsylvania journalism. We had the story just recently from the Appeal and Spotlight PA about the state troopers and what they're doing with asset seizure. You know, the reporting about the Glen Mills School, reporting about testifying that led to an exoneration. Really using humanizing language to tell the stories about incarceration and how it impacts people. Talk about the people that we have in prison who are doing amazing things that deserve a chance to come home. Show what it looks like to have old people in prison and people who are giving back to their communities. Let's tell those stories and talk to the public and let them know that they are people who are behind bars.
Ms. Placey?
I already did mention that I would encourage, if possible, to do positive stories on how people on probation have turned their lives around, particularly some of the good things that probation work do. I have some anecdotal stories, and if any journalist wants to contact me, I'm happy to share that information at a later time. But we focus so much on negative, I'd like to see positive stories. Thank you.
Senators?
I'll go. I'll be quick. Again, focus on the positive. We don't hear enough positive. You know, and you've heard this a million times, if it bleeds, it leads. Well, you know what? I think people are craving good, positive stories, and there are so many out there. I mean, right now there is a podcast, Ear Hustle, that has gotten such great notoriety, and it is from within a prison. There was a guy doing live who was one of the producers, one of the actual speakers on this podcast, and he did such a phenomenal job. He actually was looked at it and his sentence was commuted. There are positive things happening behind bars. There are incarcerated individuals who are doing life right now, who are working as mentors and doing their level best to prevent others in their communities from following in their footsteps. Focus on those stories. Kevin Bowman, as a matter of fact, we just named as the Inmate of the Year for the Pennsylvania Prison Society in all of Pennsylvania. He's been doing life for, I think, 35 years now, and he's in a mentorship program, and he is helping to divert a lot of individuals in his neighborhood from following in his footsteps. Focus on those stories. Tell those stories.
Senator Williams, 15 seconds, please, and thank you.
I want to focus upon asset forfeiture and the declining diversity within the state police department. Significant on both ends.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We really, really do. Be well, everyone. Journalists, we have a 5-minute break and we'll come back for the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.